Okay, let's jump right into it. Today, we're taking a focused look at the book, The Tenant by Freida McFadden.
Right.
You've brought us a specific stack of sources to dig into, primarily the Amazon product page, which is packed with details, author info, and thousands of reader reviews. Plus, there's an additional standalone review in there, too.
That's our raw material. And our goal isn't just to, summarize. We want to really extract the most important insights, get the core understanding of what this book is actually about, and how readers are reacting. Sort of cutting through all that volume of feedback to give you the crucial takeaways.
Yeah, get the distilled essence, like you said, of countless reader experiences.
Exactly.
It's kind of a shortcut, really, to being well-informed about this particular book.
Yeah.
So maybe let's set the scene first, based purely on what the book's description, the blurb, tells us.
Okay.
We meet Blake Porter. Sounds like he's living the dream initially. VP of Marketing, successful, engaged to Krista, and they've just bought this beautiful brownstone. Everything seems perfect.
Uh-huh. And that's where the floor just drops out, basically. The blurb tells us he's suddenly fired.
Wow, okay.
And just like that, they can't make the mortgage payments on their new place. They're in a real bind.
So desperation kicks in.
Yeah.
And they come up with a solution, renting out a room.
Right.
And in walks Whitney. She's described as beautiful, charming, down-to-earth. Sounds like maybe a helpful arrangement.
Well, maybe. But the blurb immediately throws that into question with, or is she? That's the pivot point.
Oh.
And things start to unravel for Blake pretty quickly. His neighbors suddenly seem distant, treating him differently.
Yeah.
There's this disturbing smell, like decay in the house, strange, unexplained noises keeping him up at night.
Creepy.
Yeah, and the core psychological terror starts setting in. Blake gets this fear that his deepest secrets are somehow known.
And the description explicitly states the trap is already set. That's
Yeah.
a really powerful, ominous line. It's designed to hook you, right?
It really is. And the blurb, it lays out the central themes pretty clearly. Revenge, privilege, and secrets that come back to haunt you in the worst possible way.
So it firmly plants this book in that domestic thriller territory.
Absolutely. And speaking of genre, the sources we looked at confirm that placement. On Amazon, it's categorized under literature and fiction, genre fiction, psychological thrillers, and yes, domestic thrillers.
And its rankings are pretty telling about its popularity right now.
Oh, definitely. The sources noted it hit #1 in domestic thrillers on both the Kindle store and in the overall book section.
#1. Wow.
Yeah, and also #1 psychological thriller in the Kindle store, and it reached #2 overall in the Kindle store.
Okay, those aren't rankings you get without some serious reader interest in, well, sales.
Not at all. It's clearly hitting a nerve with a lot of people.
So who's the author behind this popular thriller? Freida McFadden. The sources highlight her status quite a bit.
Yeah, she's a #1 New York Times, Amazon charts, and multiple other bestseller lists. Big name.
And her background adds an interesting layer, doesn't it?
It does. She's a physician, which you might not immediately connect with writing these really twisty thrillers.
Right.
And her work has a huge international reach, too. Translated into 40 languages, the sources said.
That's impressive. And the author bio in the sources, it includes this kind of delightful, slightly spooky detail.
Oh, yeah.
It mentions she lives in an old 3-story home overlooking the ocean, creaking staircases, the whole vibe. And then it says, nobody could hear you scream unless you scream very loudly.
Huh. That's a fun touch. Very genre appropriate.
Gives you a little peek into maybe the author's personality, right? Leaning into the atmosphere.
Definitely leans into the atmosphere of her books.
It does. Now, okay, if you're intrigued by the premise and how popular it is, the sources show the book is, well, readily available. Pretty much every format you'd expect.
Right, you can find it as a Kindle edition, audiobook, hardcover, or paperback. They even list used and new options on Amazon, if you look there.
So easy to get.
The key takeaway is accessibility. Whether you prefer digital or physical, reading or listening, it's easy to get your hands on it.
And you don't even need a Kindle device for the Kindle version, right?
Nope, you can read it on pretty much any device with the free app, or even just in your web browser with Kindle for web. Super convenient.
Good to know. It's easy to pick up if this discussion piques your interest. So let's transition to that. How have readers actually responded, according to these sources? What's the big picture from the customer reviews?
Well, the overall picture is quite positive, definitely. But with some, let's say, specific points where people differ, it holds a solid 4.2 out of 5 stars.
Okay, 4.2. And that's from a really large number of ratings.
Huge number, over 37,000, according to the source we looked at.
37,000. Wow. And breaking down those stars gives us a clearer view, I suppose.
It does. So 47% gave it 5 stars.
Nearly half.
Exactly. And another 34% gave it 4 stars. So if you add that up, that's a significant majority, 81% rating it highly with 4 or 5 stars.
That's strong. What about the lower end?
Well, 17% landed in the 3-star range, which is, still decent.
Yeah.
And then a very small 2% gave it 2 stars.
And 1 star.
Here's the thing, 0% 1-star ratings.
0% out of over 37,000 reviews. That's actually pretty remarkable.
It really is. It suggests, at the very least, a high floor of quality or maybe entertainment value. Even if it doesn't hit masterpiece status for everyone, it seems to avoid being actively bad for almost anyone.
Yeah, it certainly indicates the book avoids being polarizing in a really negative way. And the source mentions that overall rating isn't just a simple average.
Right. Amazon factors in things like how recent the review is and if the reviewer actually bought the item on Amazon verified purchase status, trying to give a more reliable picture.
That adds some credibility.
Yeah, okay. The sources also included that handy customers say summary section, a sneak peek into the common themes. What did that highlight?
Yeah, that's useful. It tells us that while readers strongly praised the book for being hooking and delivering great twists, there were more mixed feelings when it came to pacing and character development.
So strengths and potential weaknesses right there in the summary.
Exactly. It gives you a clear heads up just from that overview.
Okay, this is where we get to unpack those mixed reactions then and find the deeper insights. Let's start with the hook and the pacing because the sources show that clear split in reader experience there.
Yeah, it's quite distinct. On one side, you have tons of reviewers describing it as incredibly engaging, a real page-turner.
Right.
We saw phrases like, hooked from the first page, kept me engaged throughout, and could not stop reading. Lots of comments about finishing it super fast.
Like how fast?
People mentioned in 2 days, or 3 to 4 days. Stuff like that. It points to a book that just grabs you early and propels you forward.
Okay, that definitely aligns with the hooking praise. But then there's the other side, also mentioned frequently in the sources.
Yes, definitely. A notable number of readers felt the first half was slow.
Slow first half, okay. Or that the story lags early on. So it suggests that while the later parts might be absolutely breakneck, the initial setup or the buildup didn't work at the same speed for everyone. It's a really fascinating divergence in experience.
It really is. It makes you wonder why some readers just fly through it while others feel it drags at the start.
Yeah.
Were there any clues in the sources about what might cause that difference?
Well, one reviewer offered kind of a structural thought. They noted that the chapters are quite short.
Short chapters. Common thriller technique.
Exactly. And they suggested that regardless of the actual plot speed, those short chapters can make the book feel faster for some readers, creates momentum.
Right.
So maybe those who found it slow were less affected by the chapter length and more focused just on the plot progression itself, while others were carried along more by that structural pacing.
That's an interesting point, how the actual format, the structure, can influence your perception of pace. Okay, let's move to what seems to be the book's absolute superpower, according to the sources anyway, the twists. This seems to be where the praise is just overwhelming.
It truly is. This is consistently highlighted as the book's biggest strength, its main draw. Reviewers just gush about the jaw-dropping twists and turns.
Jaw-dropping.
Yeah, calling it an unpredictable psychological thriller story with a, quote, labyrinth of unexpected plot developments. High praise for the surprises.
And it sounds like the author, McFadden, she has a reputation to uphold here.
She definitely does. Many reviewers specifically call out her signature style like wild off-the-wall endings. And they emphatically state that this book did not disappoint in delivering those kinds of shocks. It seems for a lot of readers, the twists are the main reason they pick up a McFadden book in the first place, and this one delivered for them.
But even in this area of really strong praise, the sources offer a little bit of nuance, right? It wasn't universal acclaim even for the twists.
Right, exactly. A few reviewers did mention that while the twists were clever, they did manage to anticipate certain elements or maybe parts of the overall reveal. It wasn't a complete shock for absolutely everyone.
Yeah,
And there was one quite specific criticism raised about a character, apparently a coworker mentioned early on.
a coworker.
Yeah, who the reviewer felt was kind of set up as a potential plot point, but then ultimately just faded away. They described it as a waste of pages.
Huh. That's a very specific piece of feedback. It shows that even the really celebrated twists don't land perfectly for every single reader.
Yeah. And it suggests maybe for some longtime readers of hers, anticipating patterns might become a bit easier. Or they might critique the author's methods if, perceived red herrings don't pay off in a way they find satisfying.
That brings up an interesting point about the whole author-reader dynamic in a genre that relies so heavily on twists, doesn't it?
It does. As readers get familiar with an author's style, they might start actively looking for the hidden clues, maybe trying to outsmart the author, and the author then has to work even harder to genuinely surprise them, or at least make sure every thread feels meaningful in the end.
Okay, let's dive into the characters next. Blake, Krista, Whitney, or Amanda. The customers say, summary indicated mixed feelings here, and it sounds like the individual reviews really bear that out.
Oh, absolutely a mixed bag. You had some reviews finding the characters interesting and calling them great characters who drove the story forward.
Okay, some positive notes.
But contrasting really sharply with that, numerous readers found them, well, not really that likable.
Not likable.
Yeah, or annoying, or just generally unlikable. That came up quite a bit.
It sounds like Blake, the protagonist, was maybe particularly polarizing. One reviewer seemed quite vocal about a perceived flaw.
Yes, that specific reviewer said they found themselves getting so incredibly irritated at Blake.
Irritated. Why?
They described him as so gullible. And they even speculated that maybe this gullibility is a recurring thing in the author's books, making the characters seem less intelligent than they perhaps should be, which frustrates the reader.
Huh. So, for some, his actions, or maybe lack of perception, were a major point of friction. It makes you wonder, is that gullibility a necessary plot device to make the twists work? Or is it a genuine character weakness that some readers just found hard to accept?
Could be a bit of both, couldn't it? I mean, in this genre, protagonists often need some kind of blind spot or a specific vulnerability for the antagonist's plan to actually succeed and for the suspense to build.
True.
So what one reader sees as frustrating gullibility, another might interpret as the deliberate setup for the character's eventual unraveling or the twist reveal.
Was there anything positive said about the character perspective itself, even with those mixed feelings on likability?
Yes, actually. One reviewer specifically praised the choice to use Blake's male point of view.
Oh, interesting.
They found it refreshing and unique compared to many domestic thrillers, which, let's face it, often feature female protagonists.
That's true.
They found it particularly compelling to witness his unraveling from the inside, which suggests that while his character traits might be debated, the narrative choice of telling the story through his eyes definitely resonated strongly with some readers.
Okay. Finally, let's touch on the writing quality itself. The sources also show conflicting opinions here, it seems.
They do. It's another area of divergence. Some reviewers use pretty blunt terms like weird and goofy.
Weird and goofy, okay.
Or they felt the writing didn't seem as good as the author's previous work. That's quite direct criticism.
That is pretty strong.
It is, but then again, it's balanced by many other comments praising the writing style. You had reviewers calling it incredible, easy to read, and highlighting its effectiveness at grabbing and keeping your attention right from the start.
So it sounds like for some, the style itself is a drawback, maybe feels a bit simplistic, while for others, it's actually a key part of the book's success in being such a page-turner.
That sounds about right.
It suggests the author's writing might be optimized for speed and immediate impact, maybe, which could feel less polished or, goofy to a reader looking for different literary qualities,
Right.
but works perfectly for someone just seeking a fast, engaging read.
Exactly. It might be a style that prioritizes plot momentum and delivering those rapid-fire twists over, say, more descriptive prose or really complex sentence structures.
Okay, let's try and synthesize all this feedback now we've gone through the details. What does this exploration of the sources tell us about the overall reader experience of The Tenant?
I think what really stands out is how effectively the book seems to prioritize delivering a fast, high-impact reading experience, one that's centered around shock and surprise.
Right.
The overwhelming praise for the hook and especially the twists and all those comments about flying through the pages in a couple of days, that makes perfect sense in that context. It seems like it's designed to be devoured quickly, for the thrill of the reveal.
It sounds like it absolutely delivers on the promise of being a twisty, unpredictable psychological thriller for the majority of readers then.
It certainly seems to. And those criticisms we saw about the pacing, especially maybe in the beginning, or the debates around how likable the characters are, they might just be seen as potential trade-offs.
Trade-offs.
Yeah, trade-offs that are maybe inherent in a book, engineered for that specific kind of rapid, twist-driven entertainment. Perhaps less emphasis is placed on, say, slow burn character development or deep atmosphere building in favor of just getting to the next plot turn or the next shock.
And the author's reputation for those wild endings seems like a central part of her appeal, a promise she consistently fulfills for her fan base.
That seems to be a core element of her brand, absolutely. Readers come to her expecting those big, unexpected reveals. And even if, as some of those veteran readers noted, they might start to anticipate certain elements or critique specific plot choices, the general consensus from the sources is that the twist delivery was successful for the vast majority.
And the international feedback mentioned in the sources, reviews from Japan, Spain, Canada, India, the UK, that also underscores how broadly appealing this kind of formula is, doesn't it?
It really does. A compelling hook and strong twists seem to transcend language and region.
Yeah, it speaks to that universal draw of a good mystery and a surprising ending, regardless of where the reader happens to be.
Exactly.
So bringing this all back to you, the listener, what does this look at the source material really provide? Why did we go through all this?
Well, it gives you that shortcut we talked about. A way to understand this book without wading through, 37,000 reviews yourself.
Right.
You now know the basic premise, the genre, who the author is, and crucially, how thousands of other readers have reacted. You've got a distilled view of its strengths and its weaknesses according to its actual audience.
So you can look at these common reader experiences we've pulled out and see if this book lines up with what you typically enjoy.
Yeah.
If you prioritize being hooked immediately, if you love unpredictable plots with big twists, and maybe you aren't too bothered if the characters aren't entirely likable or if the early pacing gets debated, then based on what we found in the sources, this book seems like it could be a really strong fit for you.
And conversely, if deep, relatable character arcs are really paramount for you, or if you prefer maybe a slow burn narrative with lots of atmospheric detail,
Right.
then the mixed feedback we've unpacked provides really valuable insight into where this book might not fully meet those specific preferences. It helps manage expectations.
Exactly. The mixed reviews aren't just noise, they actually offer more nuanced picture. They show where readers diverge in their experience, and that helps you gauge if your own reading tastes align more with those who loved it, or maybe those who had some reservations.
Yeah, it helps you make a more informed decision about whether The Tenant is the right book for you right now.
It's about using the collective wisdom, really, contained in these sources to guide your own potential reading choices.
Well put.
And that brings us towards the end of this exploration of the sources for The Tenant.
We've sifted through the details, pulled out the key points, and tried to analyze the reader reception as best we can from the material.
Thanks for joining us for this look into the material.
Always interesting. Before we wrap up, here's maybe a final thought for you to consider, something that builds on what we've discussed.
Okay.
In the realm of psychological thrillers, how crucial is it for characters to actually be likable versus, say, just serving the needs of a really clever, surprising plot? Can the sheer thrill of an unpredictable twist ending carry a story entirely, even if other elements like character depth or maybe writing style fall a bit short for some readers?
That's a good question. Where does that balance lie?
Yeah, it's something to ponder when you think about what makes a truly great thriller connect with its audience and why different readers react so differently sometimes.